A 5,300-year-old copper Egyptian artifact has lain overlooked in a museum archive since it was found 100 years ago. Now, a new study that's identified it as a bow drill has implications that could literally rewrite history, pushing back the dates for this technology in Egypt by 2,000 years. Did you know that Alexander the Great founded more than one Alexandria? For over 2 millennia, his port on the Persian Gulf has existed only in ancient texts. And now archaeologists think they have finally found Alexandria on the Tigris. And in Panama, the site of El Caño continues to impress as work there has uncovered a tomb containing ceramics, gold pectorals, earrings, and bracelets, some decorated with iconography representing bats and crocodiles, giving us a glimpse into a forgotten world of pre-Columbian power, ritual, and elite rule. Also, the British Museum seems to have used AI-generated images for their social media and then mysteriously deleted it when called out. These are just 4 of the many stories and discoveries archaeologists made in the past month that are rewriting history. Come with me today on a journey through time exploring these latest exciting stories from around the world that I've curated just for you using my years of experience as an archaeologist. I've carefully researched and put together this video of well-sourced and interesting news about real archaeology. No pseudoscience, clickbait, or AI here. If this all sounds like it's right up your trench, stay tuned and let's dig in. I will be presenting in chronological order, starting with the one that goes the farthest back in time. Our journey begins around 12,000 years ago at a variety of sites in the United States, where a new study has possibly uncovered the only current known item of clothing from this time. This is important as the development of structurally and functionally complex technologies like multi-layered clothing was a turning point in our cultural evolution that helped expand our presence across the globe, particularly in the North. Finding the physical remains of clothes is really rare because organic materials tend to break down and not preserve very well, if at all. Complex clothes that would keep people warm were essential for permanent residents in northern latitudes like where I come from in Canada. To date, there are only 4 sites in the Western Hemisphere, which are all in Oregon or Nevada, where non-bone animal and plant technology from this era has been found. Now there is a new study focused on 55 pieces of crafted animal and plant materials, including sewn hide, cords, and twine, that were originally found in 2 caves in Oregon in 1958. Now, radiocarbon dating of the assemblage has found that they come from the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden cooling that occurred from around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago. The cords were braided using 3 strands and were made using sagebrush, dogbane, juniper, and bitterbrush fibers. 3 pieces of North American elk hide had been processed and dehaired, with cord made from a combination of plant fiber and animal hair sewn into the sides. This is a complex technology, as sewing pieces of hide together allowed us to make tight-fitting clothing, which would have provided more warmth than simple, loose-fitting, draped clothes. While the authors can't state without a doubt, because they don't have a time machine, that these hides were clothing, one of the items, which you see here, is a fragment of hide with a cord sewn into the edge. The cord exits the edge of the larger fragment and then extends out and into a separate, smaller piece where it's knotted to keep the cord from pulling out. Looks a lot like a stitch to me. The authors think that this is a piece of tight-fitted clothing, moccasin, bag, or container, or part of a portable shelter. The dates and taxonomic identification make it one of the earliest occurrences of both elk and elk hunting in North America, and at present it is the oldest example of sewn hide in the world. The paper also looked at 17 bone needles and 4 potential ornamental items, including a porcupine tooth with a hole drilled into the top and lines scratched into the surface. The abundance of bone needles and the presence of adornment items and very fine-eyed needles suggests that clothing was more than a utilitarian survival strategy, but also an avenue of expression and identity through decoration, much like it is today. Discoveries like this one always make me think, if the world collapsed, but I survived, would I know how to do something as simple as make myself clothes? I mean, I have some basic sewing skills, which I have actually featured on the channel, but then there's also the part where you actually need material itself to sew, and I don't even know where to start with that. I've never skinned an animal or grown and spun cotton. Well, I need wonder no longer because of the sponsor of today's video has put all of that information together in one place just in case the worst happens. The book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, is a beautifully illustrated encyclopedia of humankind's greatest innovations and discoveries. It's not just a book, but a 400-page visual chonker of a journey through the history of innovation that combines beauty, intellect, and inspiration. It covers over 180 essential topics you'd need to know if the world went boom, from how to start a fire, grow crops, and make penicillin, to, you guessed it, how to tan hides and the basics of spinning fibers using a loom and how a sewing machine works. But it's not just practical stuff. It also covers art, music, and even games. Because, you know, everyone needs to take a break and enjoy themselves when they're rebuilding civilization. You all know that I love books, and I especially love a book with good information and good art. So I'm very happy to have this on my shelf. If I've piqued your interest, you can find a link to the book and a code for 10% off in the description of this video. Our second story this month comes from 5,300 years ago and features a pre-dynastic Egyptian artifact that has lain overlooked in a museum archive in Cambridge, England, since it was excavated 100 years ago. Now, a new study of the object has implications that could literally rewrite the history of ancient Egyptian technology. I caught up with one of the authors of the new paper, Dr. Martin Odler, to chat about this exciting find. Let's dig in to what he had to say. Welcome to the channel, Dr. Odler. Can you please introduce yourself and your project?
Thank you for having me. My name is Martin Odler, and I am currently a visiting fellow at the School of History, Classics and Archaeology at Newcastle University in the United Kingdom. And I recently completed a postdoctoral project called Egypt Toolware, where I focused on the detailed study of ancient Egyptian tools made of copper alloys.
This story is obviously related to this project that you've been working on. Can you give us a bit of a background on it and how you got started?
Having a focus in my research on ancient Egyptian metallurgy, especially of copper. And I published several books and many articles. And I completed a PhD. And in my postdoc, I wanted to focus on a specific subject. So I went to Newcastle because there is Professor Andrea Dolfini, who is a specialist on the study of Bronze Age tools in Europe. But I wanted to learn the techniques from him and apply them on ancient Egyptian metal tools, where this methodology, it was like mentioned in the literature, but it was never developed systemically. The project was basically a survey of tools in different museum collections and also different expedition materials in Egypt. So I tried to gather a corpus, define a better understanding of ancient Egyptian metal tools.
And now you've come into the news and headlines with one particular thing that you found during this project. Would you mind telling us what it is?
A bolt drill made of metal. It's coming from a site, Badari, which is located in Middle Egypt. And it's the earliest identified metal drill bit from ancient Egypt, dated back to pre-dynastic times. And it was part of a broader survey in in one of the museums in the UK, in the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology at the University of Cambridge. They have many objects from Egypt, and I tried to document about 40 or 50. And this one particular object is a part of that corpus. It was interesting enough to have a complete article written about it.
And can you explain for my viewers exactly why this object is important, why it's worth getting its own article?
We have evidence of drilling on other materials. So we have some bits of wood, some bits of stone, or for example, stone pallets from pre-dynastic, so from the era before the pharaohs. And we know that drilling was taking place, but this is the first time that we can identify a particular artifact that is quite old And we can say almost 100%, okay, this was used as a drill bit for drilling into materials, and it was made of metal. It was expected, but on the other hand, I can now identify a particular object. In that article is published documentation, so other researchers from other sites, not only in Egypt, can identify similar drill bits on other sites.
When I was reading the press release for this story, I noticed that it has actually been sitting in a museum archive since it was originally excavated in the 1920s and has just been languishing there for a while. So how did you single it out, and what techniques did you use to identify it as a drill?
This grave at Badari was excavated as a part of a huge cemetery of several thousand graves that was excavated by an archaeologist, Guy Branton. He was excavating on behalf of British Museum, and Egypt Exploration Fund was distributing finds from these excavations to different museums. One of them was in Cambridge, and beyond this artifact, there was also one ceramic vessel that was found in that context. Branton published this object, and I have the exact quotation here. I quote, "Engraved 3932, dead of an adult male, there was a little awl of copper with some leather tongue wound around it." End of quotation. And there was very blurry image published of that artifact, so nobody really knew what this was. And as a part of my survey, I basically asked for about 40 or 50 objects. And I also looked back in the literature on the documentation of this object. So I was expecting this little O. Immediately when I saw it, I knew this is a drill. And I documented it with a macro photography, but also with a microscope, with a stereo microscope, so that we can see in detail the traces of the drilling and how the artifact was produced and then used. We know that they were drilling, but now we can say, okay, this is the particular artifact they are using. And what is indeed interesting and funny is that there's a gap of 2000 millennia, and if you look on the New Kingdom examples from the era of Tutankhamun and Ramses II, the drills are more or less the same. So now we can say already by Nakada 2D, which is about 3300 BC, this technology was established and this technology was working.
I saw that you guys also did some further analysis of the actual makeup of the drill, like the physical makeup of the elements of the copper. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how it impacted your study?
There are two authors on the paper, and the second one is my colleague, Jiří Kmošek, who is a PhD candidate at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And he's also a researcher at the Institute of Nuclear Physics in Czech Republic. And he did non-invasive portable X-ray fluorescence analysis of the object on 6 spots. And the object is quite small. It has not more than 2 grams, and it's long about 60 millimeters. We were not allowed to sample the object. So the data about the chemical composition are, as we say, semi-quantitative. So we know what exact metals are there, but because of the corrosion processes, the exact composition would require more advanced techniques. But this is pretty good for like a non-invasive technique, and it's quite interesting composition, because it has quite a lot of arsenic and a little bit of nickel, which is usually interpreted as an imported material to Egypt. But in the eastern desert of Egypt, that's a vast region where there are also multiple metal ore sources, and we don't know each one of them. So this is quite early, and there is a long discussion in the paper, and it might be that this is coming from the eastern desert. It's not coming from an imported material, but it was brought closer home to Egyptians.
So what would this drill have been used for?
It was definitely harder than it would be if it was made only of copper because of the arsenic, but it was not like suitable for drilling granite. It was suitable for drilling, for example, softer kinds of stones like limestone or schist, or for drilling of wood. And there are on some pre-dynastic palettes, there are traces and there are drillings that are made by a similar drill that we have identified here.
One of the reasons this headline caught my eye is because, You'll come across people largely on the internet saying that Egyptians weren't capable technologically of producing these very famous early and pre-dynastic stone polished symmetrical vessels, or that they didn't have the tools to be able to shape stone into giant monuments like the pyramids. My next question is, how does this particular drill fit into the wider picture of what we know about ancient Egypt and their technological capabilities?
Ancient Egyptian technology was not primitive. It was fairly advanced compared to the other cultures that were existing in that part of the world in that time. So if you look on the Egyptian technology and if you look on the technology of the neighboring regions, if they are using metals, this is fairly comparable. So there is no disadvantage on the side of Egyptians. The only difference is that, of course, ancient Egyptian craftsmen had hundreds of years of training and trying out the materials. And well, sometimes in contemporary academia setting, a PhD candidate is expected in 3 years to figure out everything that they have figured out over centuries. So we are slowly understanding what was going on in the technology, and there are still unexplored objects, unexplored parts of technology. And one part of this is this drill bit that we identified from Badari.
For those of us who don't know, can you explain exactly what an Egyptian bow drill is and how it would have worked?
A bow drill is a specific technology of ancient Egyptians where you have metal drill bit with a wooden handle, and around either that metal or that wooden handle is wound leather thong or leather string, which is fastened on a bow. And when you move the bow, you basically wind and unwind the bowstring, and you are propelling the drill so that the drill can then drill into other types of material. And it's faster, it's more precise than if you would be doing this just by your hands.
Alongside the drill were a few small pieces of leather string. How exactly did these contribute to your identification of the object, of the copper object, as being a drill?
It was a combination of the traces. For example, if we found the object with the leather on it, but there was no traces of drilling on the actual drill, then it's, I mean, I can propose this identification, but I don't have any evidence that this drill was really rotating and drilling into some other material. Fortunately, this is a nice combination where you have both the traces on the object and also the leather around the metal shaft.
So then what are the next steps for this project, and what's going to happen with this object, if anything?
Plenty of data to publish for 10 more years. There are some papers coming out this year which will be focused on the specific question of how advanced was the pre-dynastic metallurgy, and this won't be only focused on the copper. So I'm waiting for some decisions on some smaller or major grants, and depending on this, I will continue my work or maybe try something different.
Wow, just think about the implications this discovery has, not only for what we know about those famous pre- and early dynastic stone vases were made, but also for how long Egyptians have used and adapted and perfected copper metal tools, both of which have been used by pseudo-archaeologists to try and make you doubt that Egyptians were capable of cutting and shaping stone without modern technology. Our third story for February takes us back 2,800 years and brings us to the Carpathian Basin in Serbia, where at the site of the prehistoric Gomulava mass grave, a new bioarchaeological study of its occupants has come to the rather grim conclusion that they were killed as part of a mass execution. Trigger warning, this story is pretty grim, so if this is something that you are sensitive to, please use the chapters to skip ahead to the next story. I chose to feature this month because one of the lead authors of the paper, Dr. Linda Fibiger, was actually one of my lecturers at the University of Edinburgh. The Gomulava grave was originally excavated in the 1970s. It contained the remains of 77 individuals, and both grave goods within the grave and radiocarbon results place it in the 9th century BCE. 7 years ago, researchers started re-examining the bones using modern techniques to try and find out more information about the individuals as a part of a look at the whole region's prehistory. They were expecting to find that these people belonged to a village community that all died from a plague event. Instead, the results of their study implied that something far more sinister had happened. First, they found that the grave contained 24 adults, 12 teenagers, 4 children under the age of 12, and 1 baby. Of that, there were 21 males present, largely aged between 1 and 12, 51 females, and 5 individuals who weren't preserved enough to be able to determine their sex. The predominance of women and younger individuals is exceptional for prehistoric Europe. A screening for pathogen DNA revealed no evidence of infectious agents, and instead the researchers found that at least 20% of the individuals showed signs of violent and frequently lethal injuries, mostly to the head. These head injuries involved mostly blunt force trauma, so perhaps from like a club or a slingshot. One person had a sharp force defense injury, i.e. stab wound, and there were also a number of projectile injuries that suggest scenarios of victims trying to escape. You might be thinking to yourself that 20% isn't that high. How do you know that this was a mass execution? But the true percentage is probably much higher because not all of the skulls were completely preserved and able to be entirely examined, and not all violent attacks leave marks on the skeleton, especially those that target soft tissue, like, for example, stabbing someone in the gut. Overall, this adds up to severe violence that was brutal, deliberate, and efficient. CT scans of 8 bones showed patterns consistent with burial soon after death, suggesting that the killings occurred near Gomulova and that conditions allowed the bodies to be collected immediately afterwards. Then the research team looked at DNA, which had even more surprising results. With the exception of a mother and her 2 young daughters, none of the people in the grave were biologically related, as you would expect if it was the remains of a village or a clan who were attacked and wiped out. Chemical isotopes in their teeth showed that they weren't from the area and grew up eating different kinds of food. So it seems that a bunch of people from different communities were all killed in the same place at the same time. This violence coincides with a period of turmoil in the Carpathian Basin, as groups were experimenting with herding and farming and beginning to build enclosed settlements. The team's best guess for what happened is that people fleeing upheaval or conflict elsewhere were caught and killed by a rival group. But it wasn't a simple execution of an enemy. The grave is perched on top of a much older settlement mound that forms a prominent local landmark in the otherwise flat landscape around it. The dead were carefully arranged in a shallow circular pit, which also contained cattle and sheep bones that suggest the burial was accompanied by a food offering or an animal sacrifice. As I mentioned before, personal adornments such as brooches, hair rings, bracelets, and finger rings were found among the bones, which implies that the dead weren't looted. It could be that the slaughter had an ideological or symbolic meaning. It appears that the victims were selected and their bodies were treated in much the same way a hoard of weapons or other valuables might be ostentatiously displayed and then destroyed to demonstrate wealth and power. Perhaps the killers singled out women and children to strike at a rival community's roots. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Our next story takes us back 2,300 years to the time of Alexander the Great, when he was curb stomping the Persian Empire into submission across Mesopotamia. And instead of being like the rest of us who might visit a foreign place and leave behind a locket or some graffiti, even though you really shouldn't do that, to commemorate our visit, he liked to take things to a whole other level and found entire cities named after himself. One of these cities, Alexandria on the Tigris, was once the center of global trade networks linking Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, and India. It was established as a new port around 2 kilometers from the Gulf Coast at the confluence of the Karun and Tigris rivers and connected the open sea to inland waterways to the north and east. Later, it was renamed, and forgive my pronunciation, Charax Spasinu. It was at one time a thriving commercial center, as noted by the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, but eventually it disappeared from the landscape and the historical record. The first hints of its whereabouts can be traced to aerial photographs from the 1960s that showed a huge walled enclosure and traces of a settlement. However, further work at that time was stalled by a succession of modern military conflicts. The work first started in 2013 when a team of archaeologists working at the nearby city of Ur were asked by the Basra Antiquities and Heritage Inspectorate if they would be interested in visiting and possibly working at another place, Jebel Khayaber. The team agreed and drove 50 kilometers to the site, bumper to bumper, in heavily armored vehicles. There, they were impressed by the many kilometers of fortification walls that, even today, still stand up to 8 meters tall. On their return, they concluded that the huge but mostly flat ruins were those of the famous metropolis founded by Alexander. In 2016, they went back for 3 weeks for a geophysical survey that confirmed the rich archaeological potential of the site. It revealed an organized network of streets, walls, canals, and insula that are amongst the largest residential blocks found anywhere in the ancient world, as well as vast temple complexes and industrial districts that host a large number of workshops, including kilns and smelting furnaces that were concentrated near an inner city harbor and canal system. In satellite images, the team also identified fields along an irrigation canal system north of the city. Over the next several years, they conducted extensive surface surveys covering more than 500 kilometers on foot and documenting thousands of pottery shards and brick fragments. Drone photography allowed them to construct a detailed digital terrain model, revealing the astonishing truth. This was a massive, carefully planned metropolis. Geological cores showed that the Tigris gradually shifted westward, cutting Alexandria off from its waterway, and by the 3rd century CE, the city lay far from both the river and the Persian Gulf, which was then nearly 180 kilometers to the south. Without river and sea access, the city lost its economic and political significance and was eventually abandoned. Having now conclusively identified it, additional excavations are planned as soon as the researchers have funding to do so. Alexandria on the Tigris might be found, but it still has many secrets left to reveal. Speaking of famous generals, our next feature comes from between 2,300 to 2,200 years ago in Spain, during the Second Punic War between the Roman Republic and the famous Carthaginian general Hannibal, where, according to historical sources, he marched soldiers and animals from Carthage through Spain and France to invade Italy, crossing the Alps with 37 elephants in 218 BCE. For centuries, the image of Hannibal leading his elephants across the Alps has been an iconic recurring motif embraced by musicians, writers, playwrights, and the film industry. But actual hard archaeological evidence of this happening was non-existent until now. While excavating a multi-period site called the Hill of the Burned in Cordoba, archaeologists came across a layer with traces of an industrial area with ovens, streets, and other structures, as well as 12 spherical stone balls used in stone throw artillery, technology ironically first used in Europe by Philip of Macedon and then Alexander the Great. This evidence, together with some numismatic finds, probably points to military activity during this phase, likely related to the Second Punic War. But the most intriguing find came from underneath a collapsed adobe wall, a carpal bone from the right front foot of an elephant. This is significant in and of itself because, with the exclusion of ivory objects, the discovery of elephant remains in European archaeological contexts is exceptionally rare. Measuring roughly 10 centimeters, the bone was radiocarbon dated to 2300 to 2200 years ago. It was compared to the carpals of modern Asian elephants and steppe mammoths, which confirmed that it belonged to an elephant, but the specimen was too degraded to identify which exact species, even using DNA and protein analysis techniques. There are no indications the bone was used for decorative or craft purposes. All this evidence has led the researchers to think that the bone and the animal it comes from were linked to the Punic Wars. There are other possible explanations, of course. In the 2nd century BCE, Rome's Numidian allies in Africa may have sent African elephants as part of conquest campaigns or during Caesar's civil wars. Or elephants may have been part of gladiator games during the early Roman imperial period. However, neither of those theories line up as well with the dating evidence as Hannibal's war elephants. The bone's presence in Cordoba indicates that this specific animal probably died early in the campaign, although how the bone came to be there is a mystery, as Cordoba is nowhere near the route Hannibal took from New Carthage to Rome. But this area was part of the Empire of Carthage in Hispania at this time, so perhaps the bone was brought home by a serving soldier as a souvenir from the campaign. While we can't say definitively that this comes from one of the mythical specimens Hannibal took across the Alps, it is the first known evidence that we have of the animals that can be actually tied to the Punic Wars with Rome for control of the Mediterranean. Next up is a 2,000-year-old chance discovery from southern Tajikistan, which has opened a new window into the early history of the Kushan Empire, one of the great powers of the ancient world, stretching from modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan through Afghanistan and deep into northern India. The discovery was made when a local resident of the Shahrituz district was doing routine agricultural work and came across a small ceramic vessel filled with heavily oxidized copper coins. Once the discovery was reported, specialists were dispatched to document the context and secure the find. The hoard was subsequently transferred to state custody for study, conservation, and preservation. The numismatic importance of the hoard quickly became clear. The majority of the 150 coins were minted during the reign of Vima Taktu, who ruled during a crucial transitional period in Kushan history, likely the late 1st century CE. His reign marked the consolidation of power following an expansion into Bactria and northern India. Coins attributed to Vima Taktu are especially valuable to historians as they help establish early Kushan chronology, political authority, and monetary policy. Copper coins like these played a vital role in everyday transactions, taxation, and military supply. This hoard is extra special, as despite corrosion, its coins retain diagnostic features, iconography, legends, and weight standards that firmly place them within this early imperial phase. Their presence in southern Tajikistan highlights the region's role as an active economic and administrative zone within the Kushan world. Once restored, the coins are expected to provide data on minting practices, circulation patterns, and regional trade networks. Preliminary assessments suggest the hoard was intentionally buried rather than being lost. As the restoration continues, researchers hope that the hoard will contribute to broader debates on Kushan chronology, state formation, and regional administration. Our next find is from roughly the same era, between 1900 and 1800 years ago, and brings us to the historic heart of Regensburg in southern Germany. During routine excavations in the city's old town, archaeologists have found the remains of a Roman-era Mithras sanctuary known as a mithraeum, the oldest such site ever identified in Bavaria. Initially, the dig results were pretty routine and consisted of traces of prehistoric settlements, Roman occupation layers, and medieval remains. However, several large structural features made of wood were challenging to interpret, and it was only after all the findings were brought together and analyzed that the true importance became clear. They had found a wooden Roman temple dedicated to the god Mithras, a god whose cult was widespread among Roman soldiers, but whose sanctuaries are relatively rare north of the Alps. The cult of Mithras was one of the Roman mystery religions that practiced a complex system of initiation and ritual feasts. His temples were largely underground, with a single entrance leading to a room lined with benches. In this case, the original wooden structure had largely decayed over time, and a combination of indirect clues was needed to confirm its identification. Objects directly associated with Mithras worship were found at the site and included ceramic shards decorated with snake motifs, incense cups, jugs, and drinking vessels, which are significant because ritual banquets were a central part of the Mithras cult worship. Also found were fragments of votive metal plates, fittings from what was probably a shrine, and a variety of ritual objects. One of the most important was a votive stone whose inscription has not survived, but is typical of Mithras worship. Coins played a crucial role in dating the sanctuary and placed use of the mithraeum to between 80 and 171 CE. This discovery is exceptional for two reasons. First, it is the only Roman sanctuary ever identified within Regensburg's old town. And secondly, it is the earliest Mithras sanctuary among the 9 known Roman sites in Bavaria. Most Mithraea date to the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries BC, when the cult reached its peak across the Roman Empire before declining as Christianity became dominant. The Regensburg site predates this period, offering rare insight into the early spread of Mithras worship in the region. Given the outstanding importance of the find, the city of Regensburg and the Bavarian State Office have jointly funded an ongoing research project to further analyze the site and its artifacts, which will give us invaluable new evidence about Mithras cult rituals, helping scholars better understand a religion that was famously secretive and practiced mainly in closed communities. The artifacts will also be formally donated to the city's museum for public display. Our next story dates to 1400 years ago and brings us to the central valleys of Oaxaca in Mexico during the time of the Zapotec civilization. There, archaeologists have found an intact tomb dating to 600 CE that has been described as the most important archaeological discovery of the last decade in Mexico. This area is the native land of the Zapotecs, a name given to them by the Aztecs. They called themselves the Cloud People. The tomb was found while following up on an anonymous complaint of looting in the area. At the entrance to the tomb's antechamber is an owl representing night and death in Zapotec iconography. Its beak curves down over a red-painted stucco face of a Zapotec lord, baring his teeth in a fierce expression, presumed to represent the owner of the tomb. Found carved into either side of the entrance are a female and a male figure wearing headdresses and carrying artifacts in both hands. Inside is an antechamber with a doorway leading into the burial chamber. Above the lintel is a frieze made of different stones engraved with calendrical names. The sides of the tomb's entrance are once again carved with guarding figures. The burial chamber walls are covered in a polychrome mural of a procession of people carrying bags of copal towards the entrance. It is painted in ochre, white, green, red, and blue pigments. Ceramics and a handful of human bones were found inside. An interdisciplinary team are currently working to conserve and study the tomb. One of the most urgent challenges is stabilizing the microclimate within to preserve the mural paintings, which are threatened by roots, insects, and sudden changes in temperature and humidity that come from people going in and out of it, and even breathing. At the same time, further research is being done on the ceramics, calendrical inscriptions, relief sculptures, and human bones. Altogether, this find will deepen our understanding of the rituals, symbols, and burial practices associated with elite Zapotec tombs. Due to its construction quality and decorative richness, this find is incredibly important for increasing our understanding of the social, artistic, and symbolic complexity of the Zapotec. Our last find in February is from 1200 to 1000 years ago and brings us to the El Caño archaeological site in Panama, which we have actually visited before. The park contains several pre-Columbian burial grounds and tombs. A lot of mystery still surrounds the ancient civilization that was buried here, but the artifacts found so far are evidence of a rich system of iconography, sophisticated gold working technology, and an elaborate social hierarchy. Just 2 years ago, I spoke with physical anthropologist Alexa Hancock, who works on the archaeological team excavating the park, about their discovery of a lavish burial of a man dubbed the Lord of the Flutes. Now the project is back in the news with yet another principal burial accompanied by several other individuals and a rich array of grave offerings. Tomb 3 was initially identified in 2009 due to a high concentration of ceramic materials and metal fragments, but it was only during the current excavation season that its full structure was uncovered. The tomb dates to between 800 and 1000 CE. It contains a central individual laid out in an extended position, surrounded by prestigious objects indicating elevated social rank. These included ceramics, gold pectorals, earrings, and bracelets, some decorated with iconography representing bats and crocodiles, motifs associated with local artistic traditions. The metal objects found, especially the finely crafted gold ornaments, demonstrate advanced metallurgical knowledge and access to valuable resources. Such items were not merely decorative, but served as a powerful symbol of authority, reinforcing elite status within the community both in life and death. The scale and richness of the burial suggests centralized political structures capable of mobilizing labor, organizing elaborate ceremonies, and sustaining extensive exchange networks. The abundance and quality of the funeral offerings from El Caño confirm that it was part of a broader regional network of interaction and exchange. The site has long been associated with elite burials and ceremonial activity, functioning as a major pre-Hispanic cemetery for roughly 200 years. To date, at least 9 similar tombs have been discovered at El Caño, and at this rate, it seems like there's probably at least a couple more waiting to be found. That's it for our top discoveries. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this segment, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And now we're going to move on to talking about archaeology in news and entertainment. Our first story in this section is about the British Museum allegedly using AI-generated images on their Instagram account, deleting them when they were called out about it, and then generally Streisand affecting the whole debacle by being kind of shady about the whole thing. Here to report directly about it is Louise from Louise Archaeology on YouTube and Instagram, who has been closely following the story, collecting all of the receipts. Let's dig in to what she has to report.
On the 27th of January, the British Museum posted 4 AI-generated images. So how can you tell that these are AI-generated? Here are some details that I first noticed. They have a too perfect appearance. They look unnaturally polished. The lighting and angles don't feel consistent with the museum when I've visited previously. The background is also very quiet, and the British Museum is never that quiet. The subject's outfit changes with each image. And finally, the most obvious one, the caption tagged an AI model and AI marketing company. The comments quickly realised the images were AI generated and immediately called out the British Museum for this. Some speculated the account had been hacked. Shortly after, the post was quietly deleted and normal posting resumed. I and other creators commented on later posts asking them to address what had happened, genuinely concerned they had been hacked. Instead of responding, they unfollowed me and another archaeology creator, Steph the Archaeologist. The unfollowing of creators is a really strange move. It sets a precedent that you can't speak out against the British Museum. This unfollowing prompted me to make my original post and video. Then a few days later, I posted an updated post and an updated video with additional information. The British Museum was not hacked. Instead, they decided to repost user-generated content and obviously had not checked it in the slightest to see that it was AI made. The 2 accounts tagged were at EllieLynn1101 and at V8 Global. Ellie Lynn appears to be a fully AI-generated persona, if you can even call it that, associated with V8 Global, who claim to be an AI strategy agency. And she is still followed by the British Museum as of the time of recording, which is the 26th of February. The post was up for about 6 working hours before it was deleted. And I feel like people would have understood if they just shared a quick story saying we'd accidentally posted some AI-generated, user-generated content. However, they chose silence. However, at least one British Museum employee was not silent. An individual who worked in the British Museum's communication department was commenting on their personal account. Their personal account had their full name in the bio, and a quick LinkedIn search by @trial-and-error popped up their full job title at the British Museum. They were commenting incredibly unprofessional things on British Museum posts, my own posts, and other creators' posts. The British Museum responded to a Freedom of Information request, but other than that have said absolutely nothing. However, since my last update video, the AI model account has released its own statement. The AI posting about it and having more accountability than the British Museum was not on my bingo card. This is more than just the post and unfollowing people. This signifies something deeper about the use of generative AI, especially images, in the heritage sector. Thank you to Inside Archaeology for inviting me to speak about this.
Now, honestly, I think this is crazy that they would do this when they could simply have taken some photos of a model or people at the exhibition. But I suppose, as with all things these days, people are trying to cut corners and save money and effort by farming things out to AI. I'm not saying you can't use AI at all. It is a valuable tool, and it's kind of impossible to avoid it nowadays. But I think they're just making things worse by refusing to address it. I wonder if it was just one junior marketing person's idea that higher-ups never gave much thought to, and now it's kind of blowing up in their face. Secondly, in more uplifting news, authorities in Portugal have formally returned 3 pre-Hispanic archaeological objects to Mexico. marking the first time the European nation has restituted cultural property to the Latin American country. The pieces were illegally removed from Mexican territory and consist of a 43 centimeter tall West Mexican ceramic female figure from present-day Jalisco, dating to between 300 and 600 CE, a classic period Maya polychrome vase decorated with scenes of elite figures accompanied by hieroglyphic texts, and a Zapotec funerary urn depicting the rain deity, one of the most important gods in their pantheon. Mexican officials hailed the return as a milestone in international collaboration against the illicit trafficking of cultural heritage. As I said, all three objects were looted and smuggled into Portugal before being seized by the authorities. One had even been announced for auction before the authorities intervened to seize it. This return reflects a broader international trend towards repatriation of cultural property removed through illicit excavation, trafficking, and unauthorized sales. For Mexico, such recoveries are central to cultural policy and historical justice. All right, everyone, time to pack up our finds and hang up our shovels. That's everything for this video. Did you like it? Which discovery was your favorite? Is there anything important that I missed? Don't forget to comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel before you leave. If you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or go and give me a Ko-fi donation. If you like the look of my bookshelf, then head to my Amazon storefront to shop my shelf, or have a look at my Redbubble shop. I've made all the designs in there myself, and you can get them on a variety of t-shirts, mugs, hats, etc. I hope you come away from this video knowing that despite what crazy nonsense the algorithm might be shoving down your throat, real archaeology is alive, well, and working hard every day to broaden and expand what we know about the past. Every watch, like, subscribe, and click helps my channel connect you directly to the source of exciting archaeological news. And it shows the algorithm that people are interested in learning about real archaeology, not just sensationalism. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure inside archaeology.